Page 40.
Hello, Dr. Brad. Good morning.
Morning, Curt. How do
Thanks
you do, sir?
I'm doing fine. Well, actually, I'm not. I was supposed to go up to visit Brandon and Maurice today, and I did no way.
Oh, no.
I got out of bed. I made it here.
Oh, no. That's a terrible story.
No, you know what a good story is, though? Well, I mean, it's a terrible story, but I'll just go tomorrow or the next day.
There you go.
Um, but I know you're concerned about this, so I've had 4 bad drives accumulating with various, right? Because I have a lot of drives around here, right? So,
Right, right.
and I like my 2014 MacBook Pros. That's the best book computer they'd made until last year,
Okay.
because the new M1 chips are pretty amazing. And so the problem is I maintain the hell out of these things and I keep them. So the problem is that means they go through drives. Actually, they go through drives, they go through monitors, they go through keyboards.
Oh, my.
So I just keep them because I love them, because they don't have that stupid bar across the top, right? And I still have all the nice ports that I want.
Okay.
So I have all, after Jobs died, they took the laptop thing too far. They were really amazed by this lightness, thinness thing. And I'm like, well, yeah, but there's those of us who use the laptop as a desktop. I mean, it's a power user. We're power users. And
Right.
so they went too far. And with the new machines that have come out in the past year or so, year and a half, they've come back. But anyway, so I accumulate things that say dead drive on them.
Oh, no.
But I managed to get them working.
Hmm.
So I've got 2 of them, and I've got one more. I think I've got one more I've got to get. So because I was afraid I was losing,
Losing it.
content. I really haven't, because what I do is I keep if I get a new machine, I duplicate the other drive.
That's good.
Right, so everything's basically the same. Anyway,
Good
so
work.
so anyway, I'm trying to sedate everybody's fear that we don't have this. The next step is to put it back up in the cloud where I used to have it. But I mean, it's like you have to see the stack. I mean, I'm not going to show you, but because my desk right here is like there's a pile of medications there and a pile of drives there.
It's the pizza boxes and the empty beers.
No, I don't have any of those. In fact,
No, I'm not saying you do. I'm just saying you don't want to show them.
oh, I see.
Let's not get confused. The public wants to, we want to inspire their curiosity.
Also, I have these powered USB docks, right, that hold like 8 or 10 things, right?
Hmm.
And so I just fill them with drives, right? And then I've got the drawing pad, and the chargers for the headphones and the phone.
It's a wiry mess.
So it's just, anyway, so I'm not gonna, but just to defend myself, I want to say that I'm getting, as my health continues to improve, today's an off day, but continues to improve. My house does not look like a frat house anymore.
No.
It does not look like a bachelor pad that's had a heart party. It does not look like bachelor pad that is not being taken care of. It's probably even better than how well we've just been working this week. So,
I'm
slowly.
writing down the series. So it looks
We
like
were getting close to alcoholic, or we're above crack house, but we're getting close to an alcoholic lives here, right? I mean, there's alcoholic lives here, there's hoarder lives here, and then there's crack house, right? I mean,
yes.
it can, you can really get down there if you.
It just gets rougher and rougher.
Yeah. So when I was sick, I just couldn't. I was having such a hard time doing anything. So anyway, the place is looking civilized.
Excellent.
I gotta do a bunch of. Seems like this building's 15 years old. So I think the appliances are original. So that's gonna be the next. And it has a really ugly counter. Who puts in a green fake marble countertop? Who does that, Brad?
I don't know. I
who does that.
won't I don't claim that knowledge.
Everything else is fine. But
Hmm.
a green foam marble countertop, it's not
Hmm.
it's ugly. So, we got a little few things and we get better, probably gonna sell this place this year, but But anyway, I'm trying to dig myself out of the hole of mentioning the wires and you bringing up pizza boxes. And I'm like, look, I'm doing better, man. Partly due to you, right? I got to say
You're
that
very kind.
Brad's nagging does work.
It's persistence.
Anyway, so
That's good.
I'm happy to talk to you today. I thought I was going to talk to you from Boston. And I hope to visit. I'd like to get to Boston because I'd also not only do I want to see Maurice, who's over from Germany, but I want to see that our friend up there, I don't want to mention her name, a lawyer that is very smart lady, very smart lady, and mid-30s, I think, very smart lady. I can't remember what she went to one of the top. I don't think it was Harvard, it was Duke or something. She went to a top, might have been Harvard, legal school. So I want to spend some time with her and get around, and maybe I have a few other friends, maybe I'll visit, but right now I have the energy to make breakfast almost. So
Excellent.
not a
That's
good travel.
Wait, enough for coffee.
My coffee.
That's good.
I haven't complimented you being handsome today.
I know.
I'm trying to figure out what your jacket is made of. That's not linen, is it?
It's like a cotton wool blend. That's my theory.
It looks a little lighter.
It's a little bit lighter. So life is good. I read some interesting things this week, and I was wanted to comment on it because it was related to the work that we do, the science, because it the issue came up that one of the former Disney stars named Demi Lovato was complaining. She confessed the burden of using they them pronouns during an interview in Spain.
Yes.
I thought that was funny because it's like it's too much work, she says, to try to explain to everybody how come their norms are no good. So it introduces burden on everybody's behalf when they go against the normative preferences of the crowd they're in. And to the point where she exhausted herself. And it's like, this is just behavioral economics is how we talk about it in our most what's the right term? Parsimonious language, right? Which is why the science will win, because it's the most parsimonious way to talk about complex things.
Mm-hmm.
There's no better way to talk about it. Otherwise, we would be using those language terms, languages, grammars, and logics. So this is where you must end up, because it's the easiest way to talk about the things that are worth talking about.
Well, I mean, we're definitely seeing a counter reaction to it, right? I mean, and it's definitely growing. So the overreach was an overreach. We'll see. The problem is, can I reiterate an arc then?
Please do.
The tendency of any group to pursue self-interest and achieve it is the reward for the organizational social structure of achieving something is so high that people will continue to double down past the point of utility. So the gay movement continues because they've made an identity out of it. Instead of making an identity out of just getting the thing, they made an identity out of the movement. And they've got personal value, status, friendships, relationships, and a sense of agency within it. So what they've done is taken it too far, because that's what all groups do. They take any movement to the point of right. They seek rents to the point of exhaustion, and then they collapse. So it's not like you bring up, they double down all the time, right? I mean, that's one of your things. Everybody's always doubling down. So in this case, these groups are doubling down, and it's partly because there's no satisfaction elsewhere in life, right? They're not
to exhaust the opportunity.
right? And so they're exhausting the opportunity for some sort of identity and satisfaction, validation, and justification, and particularly attention. And you'll notice that most of these movements have a feminine aspect to them. In other words, they're fulfilling a feminine want, and the feminine want starts with attention, right? Because that's what a seduction, baiting into hazard, manipulation. I should start with manipulation, seduction, baiting into hazard. It's actually seduction, manipulation, baiting into hazard. It's that sequence. It's what they need attention in order to do it. So merely giving them attention, anything in the female spectrum attention, rather than doing the German thing, which is you're being prideful. Right, that's the sin. That's one of the sins of the German culture. Is you may not be prideful. It's really a suppression of the individual's irresponsible demand for attention without producing a heroic good in exchange for attention. Right, these aren't heroic goods. They're deviations from the optimum, which is the family.
It's interesting because there's a lionization, a prideful lionization for simple act. And it's like I saw some interesting quotes today, which is you don't get to be proud for being sexually attracted to somebody. Silly. That's silly. Yeah,
well, it's not a contribution to commons.
Right.
The thing is, that's the thing when you say, I wrote a piece on this morning because I didn't realize, it's one of those things I don't realize is obvious, right? So heroism, the reason we lionize heroism is heroism means you're taking responsibility for the commons. And by taking that responsibility, you're bearing a risk or cost, which ends up benefiting the commons. But what is the commons? Well, the commons is not the individual.
Right.
The commons is the family, the production of intergenerational families, which produce intergenerational societies, which produce intergenerational polities, which push intergenerational civilizations. Right, that's the sequence of it. So the individual, when we talk about individualism in the West, that's not it. It's individual responsibility to produce commons, but the commons are capitalized. Right, they're things you can't consume, but they're resources. Right, when we create a commons, we're creating a resource that is durable. It's capitalization. It's not a consumption. But what the left is trying to do is convert all capital to consumption. So they have the least amount of responsibility, because whenever you take on responsibility, you're entering a domain of risk of conflict with someone. Because most responsibility consists of what? Suppressing the irreciprocity of others, which is the human desire to obtain discounts on everything they have and make excuses for it. So, the economics of human behavior is actually really simple. I mean, I just went through it, right?
That's right.
So this is all feminine attention seeking in order to evade responsibility for contribution to the commons by enduring responsibility, which is enduring risk, that is together producing discounts that accumulate in the reduction of costs for the intergenerational production of families. That's people don't realize I just gave a mathematical equation, right? I mean,
I understand.
It's just math, right? I mean, it sounds like English, but it's just math. It's an equation.
That's tagging it for the nice crowd.
Right. So we're just going through like I said, we're going through that period where we have introduced the feminine into the polity and economy, and we're now in the process. We've seen that's what happens is people say, oh, new opportunity for crime. Reciprocity. And so the women are exploring their opportunities for crime, and the feminine-minded men which includes the homosexual crowd, which is their whole thing is hyperconsumption, right? So they're by attention. So what we're doing is we're seeing the production of evidence that produces the non-theoretical but empirical need for the suppression of the means of irreciprocity by the female intuition, where historically that's been held within the family and men, and now that it's been let out into the public, into the economy, and into the polity, now we've got to constrain the female female intuition for antisocial behavior, which of course they think is good, right?
Of course.
I think their antisocial behavior is good, but it really is what all female behavior is the generation of demand for irresponsibility. All right. And so there was a great piece today by somebody who really quoted us. The best quote, reductive quote is, men see the world as it is, women see the world as they wish it to be and complain about it. Well, what do you think the relationship is there? It's female demand and male supply. And so there's it's a child demand on the female, right? Or the female's mind is childish without her own children, but as soon as she gets her own children, then she takes at least responsibility for them. But she's still a demand-oriented creature, a hyper-consumptive creature who seeks the minimum responsibility, because responsibility for the commons means that you're in the process of you're put into the position of having to resolve conflicts, which exposes you to risk for which you as a woman are less competent to handle, right? So it makes perfect sense. So in this whole scheme, right, we've brought all these women in, and now we're just in the process of creating the evidence necessary to produce the laws to prohibit it, just like we've prohibited the new crimes that became available. Financial crimes by men are all over the effing place, right? I mean, there's financial crimes by men. I mean, they're freaking everywhere, right?
Right.
So there's, I mean, look at the academy is as criminal institution as the Renaissance church. I mean,
I would say that it is on par.
it's just amazing how criminal that institution is, while claiming it's virtuous for the same reason. Here's your diploma, which is your permission to be forgiven of the sins of being
indulgences for everyone.
Exactly. So we're just going through that process, and when I'm in a good mood and I understand that's what's going on, and I understand we know how to solve it, that's okay. When I'm tired and I'm frustrated and have to deal with a lot of stuff, it's exasperating. Like this, who published that? Moritz this morning, he published that ruling in Boston against a guy who wore a shirt and said there was only two sexes, and said that wasn't protected speech. And I'm like, I gotta find out who this judge is, because he's off the bench. I mean, right. It's really hard to make that big a mistake in law, right? So my only choice is I've got to research it and find out if the claim is true, if that's what actually happened.
That's right.
Right, because that's what you happen. Right, the news articles show up, and it's not actually what happened, or it's a minor tangential value that's misinterpreted for the purpose of clicks. But I'll look onto that one later. But I mean, that would be like, how can you be a judge and think that saying there's only two sexes, which is a statement of truth or falsehood, which is an imposition upon the rights of, it's not an imposition of the rights of others. We haven't established that's a right. There's no law in the Constitution that establishes this a right. There's no jurisprudence that establishes a right. There are claims that they would like it as a right.
Yes.
They're campaigning for having this as a right, but they can't. The truth is, you can't obtain a right to lie.
Right, a right to avoid the truth.
Right. So anyway, so I'm just doubling down on your insight there.
We're all on the same page.
It was an interesting week. What else did you come up with this week? Anything else?
Let me think.
Oh my God!
Note on that. I know, right? So forgive me. Yeah, it's been interesting, and it's like I think that was the main thing. That one. It's interesting to observe the thinking going on with relation to the science, as the science infiltrates your mind, and you observe people talking about things, and you understand the science behind it, and they say something, and then you can reduce it to the scientific statement that underlies it. Like there was a question about racism that came up today, and I'm like, racism is just a political pejorative term to denigrate people who share the common human trait of in-group preference.
Yes.
And that it simplifies it just, and it's done. It's fascinating to be able to do that and collapse.
Well, it would be one thing if it wasn't actually true that in-group preference is an advantage. right? So grant advantage for every group. That's why every group does it. But the problem is the other groups don't want us to do it.
They don't want you to do it because you're so good at everything else.
Right, and of course, we heard about the Jews having group. They're the most obvious ones, right? Because they're in group preferences like what the British was or the Europeans was during the colonization period, right? So Jews are just behind us in adapting. Well, the difference is that we've already outlawed all those crimes they commit, but we haven't because we have outlawed them. We've outlawed them through normative outlawing, right? We haven't had to outlaw them through criminal outlawing. And was one of the discoveries you and I have made over the past year is the significant influence of not outlawing baiting into hazard. When in fact that's exactly what they do. What do women do? They seduce in order to manipulate, in order to obtain rents, and if not possible, they undermine. Right, and that's the female behavior. Well, what's Jewish behavior? It's the economic version of that, and they're really hella good at it. I mean, every discipline they're in is basically rent seeking, and you can see it if you go to the list of the top 1,000 wealthy people in the country. The Jewish names are in rent seeking occupations.
Very good.
Baiting into hazard. And the problem is we just haven't outlawed it. And it's really weird to me that this gains credibility with the founding of the Bank of England, which really would have been fine if the monarchy owned the bank. Right. It's the same thing with what happened here, because we had the same problem. We repeated the issue of Fed as a private entity here. And so we made this mistake, whereas the French just said, I have a few things I got to compliment the French on.
Oh my, it's a red letter day. I was going to say this. It's like it stopped clocks and all that.
Yeah, just for the audience, I'm half French. I mean, I'm allowed. I can pick up my own.
He has a special license. Indulgence has been granted.
Although the truth is, you can't tell the difference between northern France and southern England. There's no genetic.
It's all Viking.
It's all the same thing. It's all the same fucking people. It's all Normans. So in any event, shit, I lost my train of thought there.
Oh, that was good. You cursed twice in like less than one's breath.
Damn it.
3 times, my goodness. Now you got your the AI.
I was picking on the French. Well, the French did the right thing.
Yeah,
because
they nationalized the bank.
They seized Rothbard's asset and nationalized the bank.
Rothbard.
What'd you say?
Rothschild.
How did I? Oh, I was writing about Rothbard earlier. Rothschilds. And so what? Just
red shield, not red beard.
That's funny. I mean, and they made their money what? By betting against.
They bet against the princes.
Yeah, I mean,
just bet on both sides and take interest from everybody.
Well, it's a good scam, right? And unfortunately, the French, who we get to blame again, now I can see I blame them, is they're the ones that killed the Templars, who were our Jews, right? That's who the Templars were. That's what Switzerland is today. It's the remains of the Templars. You wonder where that metaphysical set of judgment came from in Switzerland. It's because the Templars went. I guess it looks like that. There's no other place they could have gone. So that's
what remained. Switzerland is the rump state of the Templar organization.
Yeah. Well, if we had our Templars, right? If we hadn't had Friday the 13th, right? That's what Friday the 13th the ref celebrates, is the destruction of the Templars.
A worthy story. For those of you who haven't read this story, read the story.
Yeah, it's worth it. So the Templars were doing, and they were doing it within the European ethic, right? The problem is that when the papacy and the French conspired against the Templars because they thought they could nationalize or take over the money of the Templars. only to find out that you can't rob a bank that is running on credit because the money's all out there working. There's no money in the bank. It's all promises, right? And so, the problem where they ran into is that the papacy conspired with the French crown because they were related. Why? Because France has been trying to move the papacy to France since God knows when. You know? And so when they destroyed the Templars, only to find out that because the King of France was so in debt to the Templars, he was trying to get out of debt. So the French screwed up basically our own Jews, giving the license to Jews, right? In other words, the financials, give the license to them, and they filled the gap, right? Because they are the difference is they didn't fill it morally, and they got in trouble every damn time, whereas the Templars filled it morally.
Right.
Anyway, so did I was that
That was pretty good.
that distraction?
They stole all the property of the Templars.
Yeah. Well, they were trying to set up a Templar state. They're trying to do what they eventually were successful in doing with Switzerland, really, is that they were trying to buy land so they could set up a state. Well, they want to. Why do they want a state? Because they want to be able to protect the organization, right? They want to be able to protect it and build it, right? But so my view is that was one of the great failures of Western civilization. We really wanted that to happen because that set the trend for this problem that happened in the Bank of England, as we have hostiles running the financial sector instead of domestics running the financial sector.
We go was 1298,
Right.
1299, 1300. That would be about the end of it. Wait, I got to get the date right for the crowd. 1307, Friday the 13th.
Yeah, that's
1307.
That's right.
Now we're on the right page. Sorry about the dates.
Well, but I mean, we bring it back to once you govern by force and create rule of law, the next degree of precision is governed by credit. The next degree of precision is governed by information, and we got to make that not fucking happen. Because that's what the Chinese, the Soviets,
social credit scores.
right? Because that's arbitrary. Criminal performance is demonstrated. All right, we know what that is, and financial
projected.
Right, that's a responsibility. The problem is when we get down to informational, like behavioral responsibility, that's now we get into the problem of if it's not a crime, how do you, I mean, it needs, what's the crime, right? For example, it leads to fascism, the worst kind of fascism, which is saying you can't even think about this. We need people to be able to have stupid ideas, right? Stop.
I'm like, no, I'm cleaning up my shop and I'm like running across stuff that I did 20, 30 years ago. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And it's kind of like, what's interesting to me is I'm cleaning it up and I got past these major hurdles and I'm cleaning it up. And it's like, it's really not that crazy messy. It's not that bad. And it's like, okay, I'm just tidying it up and taking out a few mistakes that just take up space. It's okay. So there's not too much. There's some wandering thoughts in there, but they're just cobwebs.
Because I was backing up this hard drive I was telling you about, so I'm going through it. I was like, "What the heck is on here?" Right? I mean, stuff going back to 2000, you know. So I'm in there and I'm running across my documents folder because I keep everything, and it's really embarrassing to keep it because some of that list up I wrote during my libertarian phase.
I understand.
I mean,
no, it's before the Twin Towers fell. That's pretty impressive. It's like, wow, that's a different time scale. Like it's like a blast from the past, right? Like ancient innocent times.
Yes. So when you're, it was, I don't remember. I remember, I started deliberately working on my writing when my friend Frank said, "You're incomprehensible." And so what I started then is I'm like, I have to figure out how to be able to say this stuff. So I've got to create a universal, but I have to.
That's hard, man. That is just to make that flow of information comprehensible is no small task.
It was ridiculously hard, right? I mean, but it took me obviously a long freaking time. So I mean, you helped me get it even further. So
I'm glad to be here.
But I mean, it's really embarrassing to look at that other stuff, but it's good because it lets you appreciate other people who are on their journey.
That's right, because it's the scratchings of cavemen.
Right. I mean, there's nothing like the moral intuition is in the work, what I was writing.
Yes.
Right? But I was still in that phase where, what I would call the hopeful phase. Right, where I thought
I was watching some Martin Armstrong this morning, and it was like he was working against his AI system that was predicting all kind of disastrous things, and he's trying to make it not come true, and he's like fighting the losing battle against his machine.
Yeah.
It's like, good, that was nice. Young man has to give it a go and prove that he's wrong.
You know what's really bad?
What's that?
This is how reducible it is. It's homogeneity and IQ and size. That's it. If you want, those are the three variables.
Homogeneity
of the population, the IQ of the population, and the scale of the population.
Okay.
That's it. Then you start with that, and you give them property law.
Yeah.
It's tort. That's all that matters. The rest. So that's why it's so disturbing. Like I tell you, I keep this amazing spreadsheet.
Yes.
And which I think I need to update it. I'll probably set some time in August to update that.
Very good.
But I don't think the numbers have changed that much.
We probably should get a team to help do that.
It's probably a great idea.
Just because it's just a job, and it's a graduate school job or a undergraduate level job. It's not.
The availability of data now is insane, right? You just look. I mean, once they get the AI, so it's updated and current, right? I mean, just ask it these dumb questions, right? Because it's just the volume of the different kinds of data that provides the confirmation. So, but if you look at it, it's just, I mean, it's,
that's it.
It's just really IQ. Oh, I should have put a rule of law. So it's homogeneity,
IQ,
scale, IQ, and a rule of law. That's it. Those are the four. If you take those four measures, that's the answer. And then and that's the problem. When you look at this thing, people want to say IQ does not. IQ is everything. Because it matters more what your population is, the other people around you, than you.
Oh yeah.
And the bottom is
because I was thinking about this. It's like this is why the smart minorities seek to defect to white neighborhoods. Correct. Because they can't organize their neighborhood into something that's reasonable.
Correct. And the other thing that really annoys me is white people are the least racist people. I
know. I wrote that today too.
So it just annoys me. Like, if we care that you adopt middle class ethics, manners, morals, ethics, and behavior traditions, right? That's all we care about. Right. So they call it being white. Well, I mean, that's whiteness. It's not about the skin, it's about the behavior, which is majority.
Right. It's normative behavior.
I don't care as long as I get manners, ethics, morals, traditions, values, institutions, rule of law, all those stuff, high investment parenting.
Wait. I'm gonna paraphrase that for the audience. As Curt just says, I don't care as long as I get what I want.
Well, it's not. Wait a minute. Okay, what I want. You're such a dickhead. I would be far better off if I defected to the Jewish model, like a
Oh,
lot
yeah.
of my peers have in history or over the past decade, because it's way more rewarding. The problem is I'm moral and
It's the noblesse oblige.
I just have it. It's part of my culture.
I
was-
understand.
So
It's
I'm
like we call it a moral failing.
what? Moral failing.
It's a pin. It's tying you down. Oh my, that's no. I suffer from the same thing. It's like because it's like you got to pick which side you're going to pick. You can't be on both sides.
Yeah, when I went to therapy a long time ago, they told me that your problem is really simple.
Uh-oh.
You think you're responsible for everything, and you act like you're responsible for everything, and nobody can be responsible for everything, but you won't stop. Okay.
That's correct. Your analysis is correct. Here's your money. We're done here.
I was like, great. How come it doesn't change how I feel, right? I mean, I feel like I'm responsible for it. Right. So, because I was just trying to, why I'm just trying to, because I went for stress, right? Because that's what you do as CEOs, you go to a therapist, I'm really stressed and whatever. I just need somewhere to work this because I don't want to take it out of my family or my employees or my management team, whatever.
Right.
And so you just go in, I'm just like,
So,
and then
so Kurt found the ultimate release. The ultimate release for Kurt is unlimited research on social media. He gets to be mean to everybody.
oh, that's probably got truth in it somewhere, and I don't like it.
It's far too close. It's like it's so
that hit home.
It's like pulling wings off flies.
Yeah. Oh,
almost exactly the same.
It is. Yeah.
Oh Lord, that one is going to take some
Catharsis
recovery right
by
there.
pulling the wings off human flies. No, the
Human
metaphysical wings off human flies. Yeah.
Wait, so that makes you Beelzebub, Lord of the Flies. That was Aramaic.
You just ruined my day.
I know, right?
And that insight was a little too cutting. True though. Anyway,
And amusing. That's Kurt's release. He gets to go do research on people that need researched.
Yeah, they need research.
Life is good.
Well, I thought we were coming up on something. We were trying to. Oh, I was trying to get to. So the way we fix the problem is we re-nationalize, as the monarchies should have, as France did,
Finances.
Yeah. Whereas if the monarchies had preserved the finance, monarchies wouldn't have been weak and vulnerable to their conquest, and they would have had an income stream like that would have been.
It's an interesting function because I came to this conclusion this week. In fact, it might have been yesterday, which was there's a famous quote that comes out about Abraham Lincoln and his greenbacks. And it came out of Europe, and it's like this. If these Americans with their interest-bearing currencies are not stopped, it will destroy the monarchies. This is 1860s, and it's like, yeah, that's the Bank of England boys broadcasting their propaganda to make sure that you don't endanger the Bank of England.
Exactly.
But what? How that? But I didn't figure it out till yesterday. I'm like, oh, I see what happened there. But it took the insight of this science to figure it out.
Well, let's run with that, because you brought it up twice now. Is that what did I say the other day? I said the problem I riffed off something, a piece of research paper that talked about the CIA. And they said, you come in as president, right?
Right.
And you know what everybody else does, the public does, right? And then you're the president. And all of a sudden you get this shit dumped on you and you realize the depth of knowledge our people have about the world.
Yes.
And about what's going on and the trends and the risks and stuff. And that stuff isn't shared with the public as it can't be. Right. And so you see all this stuff and you become you're originally excited by the fact you've got all this new information. Then you're eventually frustrated because no one understands what you're doing
Right.
because of that information. And so, and the problem is they can't understand. So this is the same with what we're doing, right? We're in a position where we're sort of like the scientists opposed to the theologians.
That's right. We're working from a different playbook with more potential.
And they're really highly invested in their frame because neural economy, social economy, right? Relationship economies, political economies, all these economies that they're a part of, they're invested in things going that way. Whereas we're saying, oh, when you get to calculus, all of a sudden you can do this moving body thing, and all of a sudden the universe gets a lot simpler. Well, what do you think? What do you think economics is? It's the application of calculus to human people, right? Now, what is calculus? It's the difference between things. It's differences. The mathematics of differences. But if we've been built on ethics and morality that are oneness, and you and I are sitting here saying, actually, it's a competition between two things.
It's in a space, right?
Right. It's the male and female variation, and computation of success between them is what determines a positive or negative loss, positive capital gain or negative loss.
Right.
Right. So we're putting on people as big a change in thought as Greek reason.
I want to recapitulate that just for the audience, okay? Because what you just said is so profound. It's fascinating, which is modern. And I will call them the moderns. We're after that. The moderns look at things like this. Is the difference between the two poles is all that matters. So it looks like a dot. It's a linear function. Whereas we're talking about a distribution of functions and their interplay between as a
equilibrium.
It's a multi-dimensional function versus a monodimensional function.
Right. And so my same argument with computation is the same argument. It's computation is simulation. Mathematics is description. And so the problem is that this thinking we have, which combines computation, first, we have enough now, in other words, evolutionary computation, this first principle of poles, right? Calculating up and down, right? The calculus, which is the first mathematics that could describe the world as it is at scales, instead of in the domain of human perception, right? Because lines are pretty good at human scale, right? Buildings and things like that. But the minute you get out to big scale, you need the calculus to determine relative change, right? It's the same thing with economics. We brought calculus into economics, and all of a sudden we understood marginal value. In other words, things don't have values. People value them differently. My contribution is to reduce it to time, right? And then we get into behavioral science now. So in other words, we've dealt with physical science, then we've did with scale political science. Now we're drilling it down to interpersonal and social science, and we're saying that, oh my God, that's also a problem of calculus, which is the relative change between two poles, discovering an opportunity for stable relations. Capital. Well, just as, and I wrote this piece this morning, is that this is because you and I have been working on this, is that, what's the difference between order and cooperation? Well, cooperation is using us as the baseline, the generalizable term for all order. Well, that's what it means. And so when I say that we're seeking order, or people are seeking order, they're seeking a means of cooperation with the least amount of conflict. That's what order results in.
Yes.
And the same thing, the universe is seeking order, which is how it takes the resource of entropy, unorganized energy, and organizes it into organized energy, which I'm going to call that system of organization cooperation, which is an anthropomorphic projection. But because I want a universal term, I'm going
Yes.
to use the term that includes the greatest scope of meaning, which would be to
Yes.
take cooperation at human scale and extend it both large and small. So did I make my point there?
That
So-
makes total sense to me. Not, it's just like, so what is an interesting function is it's a generalization of a anthropomorphic term, cooperation, to all physical interactivity.
Right, cooperation is organization, right? That's what it is, right? And so, and what is the rest of the world? It's order. What's entropy? They call it disorder. It's a resource, or it's an unorganized resource, or it's energy and resource.
Right.
So we bring it into order, which is takes the resources and produces something of it that's is organized or ordered. But we can call that organized and ordered, but we could say, well, human cooperation is order. That's just, for some reason, that seems like epistemologically confusing to me. Where I would say the way it was cooperation is what we do, which is the most sophisticated version, right? And then we can anthropomorphize and we project that back into the world and say, well, it's the equivalent of cooperation, involuntary cooperation, right? Whereas we participate in voluntary cooperation.
Okay, which is interesting. So it's like this. I take it back to the discussion about differences and then equilibria, which is equilibria are calculations between distributions.
Correct.
And the differences.
We call it coincidence of wants.
Huh.
Right. So you fulfill a coincidence of wants. And so what we're trying to do is fulfill the maximum number of coincidences of wants, producing the greatest increase in individual satisfaction, which is equivalent to the increase in capital. So what we're looking for is to create order, right, which is cooperation at larger scales. And we do that by eliminating non-cooperation. In other words, it's one thing to say, I don't want to cooperate with you because I have a field of choices here that's better. Or I disagree with what your field of choice is, which is violent. It says that you're not satisfying an equilibrium. But then there's crime and sedition and treason, right? And undermining and disinformation and lying and deceit and false promise and baiting into hazard and all that shit, which is basically is entropy, right? It's an attempt to destroy order and cooperation.
Yes.
By the human search for discounts on productivity. So what am I trying to get to here? What I was trying to get to is, you brought up twice that the science that we work on provides pretty much universal explanatory for all observable phenomena known to man.
That's the intention, yes.
Well, but I mean, you keep saying it does, right?
It does.
And all our people say
no, it really does.
It really does. So
wait. Okay, I'm good. I'm gonna hang. I'm holding. That
okay.
was for Uncle Kenny. I'm holding my tongue.
Okay. So the problem is that it takes, you and I have gone over most of the scope. Like what I'm doing with you now, the past couple of weeks seems to be, is I'm tying those things together at a larger scale, right? Because you have the knowledge to now that when I say it, you understand what I'm talking about. Me sounding like a blithering idiot.
It doesn't just sound like English.
So what we get here is that we forget, though, that explanatory power is on this scale. It's on the scale of the calculus. It's on the scale of equilibrium and economics and market. I mean, if you're an economist, you understand that's the core of economics. Is all human organizations seek disequilibrium, right, advantage, until they're forced back to equilibrium, right? And which is, disequilibrium could be good, right? It could be better. So it basically, you would say that it's basically the calculus applied to aggregate human behavior, from ethereal bodies in the spaces and planets down to groups of people working in. And what we're saying is, okay, now you can take it down here. The problem is, we take it down here to this individual level, explaining everything. All of a sudden, we've made it harder than the church resisting Galileo. We've made it harder than the church and the philosophers resisting Darwin and
Oh yeah.
Malthus,
There's
and
wait,
Wenger.
no, you know the difference is, right?
Well,
It's like the difference is that there's more tombstones in the way. Right? And it's like that's the polite way to put it.
yes.
The impolite way to put it is the Eli way. Is there's too many stacks of skulls yet to be mounted.
Yes. Well, I'm going to stay in the charitable range.
That was the civil man or the civil mechanisms.
So if we had that much trouble with Kepler and Galileo, etc., right? And we had that much trouble with Darwin and Menger and Spencer and Malthus, right? Because really, what we're living through right now is the post-war rebellion against eugenics. That's what the left is, right? It's the discovery of Darwin and the necessity of eugenics, right, is continuing natural selection. That's what the left is. It's the female instinct applied in the field method of argument to undermine. Now we're getting down to where there's no excuses anymore. There's nowhere to run or hide. Right? When it was celestial mechanics we were dealing with.
Right. You can ignore that.
You can ignore that. When it was Darwinian mechanics,
it's just birds and bees and stuff.
Yeah, you can ignore that, right?
Safely.
Now we get the eugenics movement, which is the natural progression, right? Is that holy this turns out to be really bad. This industrial revolution reproduction thing turns out to be really effing bad, right? And then you get the counter reaction to it. What do you think the reaction? What do you think the friction is for learning that? Well, we can explain everything now, and it's actually pretty simple. But the main insight that we're going to give you is the same one as that they've given you before, is that it's an equilibrium between two poles, and the ideal is whatever cooperation is, or whatever cooperation is that's voluntary and reciprocal and whatever, discovers a pathway satisfies a coincidence of wants between the distribution of instincts of the sexes, which are basically an intertemporal division of labor. And so you have to, so all of a sudden there's no ideal, there's no universe, whatever, there's only whatever's not bad and whatever we can do, right? And so now we've taken the left and we've basically used a guillotine on their entire intellectual framework. And that's the whole thing, the Marxist, the neo-Marxist, the feminist, and the libertarian, the post, did I say the postmodern?
No, you did not.
Postmodern, the feminist, the neoconservative, the political correct, and the woke. And we've just said you're all basically the church trying to undermine Galileo, right? Or the anti-evolutionists, the fundamentalists trying to undermine Darwin and Wenger and Spencer and Nietzsche and whatever. And we should expect that these fundamentalists will continue.
This is good, because now you framed this in an interesting pattern. The framing now becomes this, is that they're the revolutionaries, or they're the reactionaries, excuse me.
Right.
The scientific revolution continues and the reactionaries must come out.
Correct. And so the fundamental problem is that the more asymmetric reproduction, in other words, the more folks we have that are below the line, the more impossible it is to correct. And so that's why they're immigrating all these people, right? They're trying to make it so that they
do you think they know what they're doing?
I think they know what
they
doing.
Know politically what they're trying to get away with.
Right. They don't know scientifically what they're doing. They
don't care.
The left was honest. It's all about power. It's not about truth or goodness. It's about power.
Not even goodness.
Right. Well,
professors think they're going for goodness. Professors are mistaken.
Do women voters know that they're looking for good? What are they doing? They're actually doing badness, because you can't externalize caretaking. It has to be
you have to care, or you don't care.
Right.
You can't delegate that one.
Right, because you're not paying the caring requires epistemic, right? It's a cost. You have to pay the cost. What you're trying to do is get other people to pay the cost of your delusion that you're doing good. And so you can feel good that you've done this. What you're really doing is satisfying the women are really doing it, betas are really doing is satisfying their need for feeling like they're not encouraging conflict. It's once you realize every good thing they think about is a mirror of what is real. What they're really doing isn't caring. It's avoiding responsibility. What they're really doing isn't moral. It's avoiding it's avoiding responsibility that comes with a conflict of policing others. What they're really doing isn't trying to achieve fairness. It's trying to achieve rent seeking. Everything they do is immoral. And like I said this to a woman the other day, is don't run with this feminism thing like you think you're doing, because what's happening is you're restoring the long tradition of every man in the world thinking women are the origin of evil. Don't do that. We spent a couple of thousand years. We did all this stuff like especially the chivalric movement, right? How do we domesticate the warriors? Right? It didn't work, by the way. What worked is it turned into a middle class value. Right? So what did that do? Well, it turned men into trying to seek to be virtuous to women. But how are you going to treat women if otherwise? The natural way you treat women is the way the world treats women. So don't play this feminist card to the point where you're saying, I want more than opportunity for economic self-sufficiency and self-determination. Don't say I want to exercise my instincts power. Because that's what they want, right? They want power because they believe they're right. It's an instinct that they're right. They can't actually reason through it. If you teach,
they can't naturally. It's an interesting function. So I thought of this when we were speaking earlier this morning, which is Pandora's box. Okay. Right. Pandora's box is a limited space for women to have power inside that box. But the box itself is made out of masculine edges.
Right.
And if it's not properly constrained, it is unleashed upon the world in an unrestrained fashion. It is dangerous.
So I don't like knowing this. Do you like knowing? Somebody's got to.
It's that's a very weird premise, because
somebody's got
my preference has nothing to do with it. I'm afraid.
Exactly.
It's vital information.
Right. It's just how
it will kill you if you don't understand what you're dealing with.
Really, I mean, it's just I don't want to know all this stuff. I'd prefer to live I would prefer really to somebody else solve this problem, so I can go start another, especially this AI fund going on right now, start another business, make another $100 million, and I would prefer that. But I can't, because I'm taking responsibility for the crisis of the age. Right? So somebody's got to be responsible. Like I started out this arc with saying, well, what happens as you have this knowledge? All of a sudden, you realize how alone you are. Right? That's what produces this feeling. The only way to fix this realizing of alone you are with all this knowledge, right? Not because it's secret knowledge, not because like the Gnostics we believe we have some, right? It's just the evidence of what's happened out there in reality. We understand the science, that's what it is. Is that it's hard to give people the knowledge.
You can't give it away fast enough.
You actually can't. And so that's the problem we have, is that people say, why are you trying to be popular? I want to be popular with this movement. I'm like, I actually want to produce judges, right? If it gets popular as well, that's great. But without judges, we can't have people who are other than reducing everything we do, which you see, right? You see the new people come in and try to reduce everything to some simple form that requires less adaptation of their internal framework.
Well, it's like this. It's preferable.
Right? I mean, you understand.
Preferable because it takes so much effort to modify this interior.
Right, it takes a lot of effing work. So, I mean, we're basically.
That one doesn't count as a cuss word.
Yeah. So I'm trying, thank you for trying to help me. So unlike the president who's being dumped the knowledge from the CIA and goes through this euphoric period, then
Right.
to this understanding, then into this lament, right? Is that he can't tell the people all this stuff, but we can.
That's right.
But we have to bear the burden of being the Galileos, the Darwins, the Mengers, the Nietzsche's. We have to bear, the
Jacques de Molay.
the Newtons, right? So we have to bear the burden of it, and I love Jefferson, but he really kind of screwed it up with his overenthusiasm with the French, his optimism. It's fascinated with the worst government in Europe. Anyway, and somebody from Africa trying to argue with me about the monarchies being horrible. I'm like, you just, the propaganda is just amazing. The framing of history
Yes.
in order to justify democracy is hysterical. Whereas, like, there's no conflict between a monarchy and a democracy. There's a matter of fact, England's the whole point of the Scandinavian countries have proven this. It's actually an addition to democracy. The problem is you have to do it the English way and the way we're explaining it, which is they're above the law and the restoration laws. It's the fashions of the people cannot override the intergenerational interests that the monarchy stewards. Right? That's the whole thing, is to prevent what we would call hedonism, right? Or utopianism, or irresponsibility of the common people. That's why you want a monarchy, because their interest is intertemporal. And they might, and the same thing you want nobility for, is their interest is intertemporal. You need somebody who's thinking about more than just next quarter.
Okay.
So, and I try to explain this to somebody who doesn't have the requisite education in economics or history. They're just saying that monarchies were bad. I'm like, how can you say that when Napoleon destroyed all of freaking Europe? Right? It wasn't the monarchies that were wrong. The monarchies were right in the First World War. Right? The problem was the rise of communism. Right? And there's still people who think communism and socialism are good things out there. I mean,
there's no limit to confusion.
Well, there's no limit to therapy, which is what it is. It's therapy. It's people is pursuing therapy. We said a lot of heavy things in our first hour here already.
Whew. Yes. I think it's time to get some more coffee.
Okay, I'm going to pause.
All right.
We're back with Fred. I have mine already, but Brad's still brewing. He's gonna get up and get his in a minute.
I will, but it's now starting to pour. So it's interesting to me to be engaged in the social media on Twitter and engage in just common conversation with people who are not introduced to the science, and then be able to introduce the science into the discourse. It's interesting to me, and I point to the Institute on occasion, and I told you to point at the Institute more in your tweets, because you don't do it as much as you might.
Interesting. I don't do it.
So I sent you a message today that said that you should probably put the link in there just to make it an easier click.
I have a shortcut that's NLSig, and it types out my signature, and I'll just add it to that.
There you go. That was a no-brainer. I like that systematizing. Let's see.
Well,
now, do you have a way to measure if it's being effective, like how many people are visiting the site or something? Have you figured that out yet?
as I said, I have to re-enable it.
Okay.
We moved the site up there, what, a year ago?
Yeah.
And because we were running into those performance issues and we had the hackers. Oh my God, the hacker thing was a nightmare.
I have to show off my clean cups. I cleaned it.
That is beautiful. It looks almost
But it's like it's such a special occasion.
like you go cup virginity. I mean, you're kind of like one of those women.
Well, it's like having
claiming that.
the queen or something, you know, it's like
Oh, let's see. Trying to take it in the gutter if I could.
you don't do that. That would be rude. Simply unheard of. My goodness. Life is good. Like I say, we're doing gangbusters, and it's like I don't know. I'm watching it. It's interesting. I'm trying to. My goal is to grow my Twitter feed, and then see if I can get them to do something useful.
Herding cats, man. I
I
have
think-
very low expectations of mankind.
I only expect. It's like we work with the rarefied bunch in the institute. That's good. Those guys are doing good work, and I expect them to do great things. And it's like, what? You don't exactly know what that turns into, but you provide some opportunities for them, and they will engage in those opportunities as they see fit. They'll find their own equilibrium in there, and that's the same thing occurs with the wider audience. I think is you give them a place to participate, and some of them will.
Yes. Well, I mean, we're doing great. I mean, I'm not knocking that. It's pretty awesome. I notice as my health keeps improving, especially over the past couple weeks, my writing is getting better. It's less work. It stays in my head longer. Not very good today, as you know, as I said earlier, but definitely better. I can't do what I could do in 16, 17, but almost. I'm getting better. But you know, the arguments are flowing nicely. But I mean, we were just talking about earlier how like, well, looking back in the 2000s, even as late as 2006 or 2007, I look at myself and I'm like, what the fuck?
But it's like looking at the world so it's like distorting lenses. You know what I mean?
Yes,
It's all it is. It's like you're looking through like corrupted, and they're relatively corrupted because you have refined the lenses of language, logics, and grammar since that time.
right.
To a point where the lenses look so incredibly crude that the image projected through them is distorted
Right,
right. That it's like a fun house, right? In fact,
Yeah.
I was at this clinic on Thursday, which, speaking of the fun house, I went to the local hardware store. Now this town has 1,700 people. It has a picture, it has an airport, and it has a picture of a jet that made me laugh when I saw it. So I had to take a picture of it and send it to my brother-in-law, the jet pilot, because it's like a ridiculous caricature of an airport sign, right? Because it's like there's no jets landing here. Oh, God. And so I took a picture of it because it made me laugh out loud. I stopped the car on the road and got out of the car illegally to take the picture. So, or I stayed in the car. Either way, it was illegally parked on the road. So, but the building is itself it's a 3-part mobile unit that has been turned into a clinic. And it is so remarkably out of date. It's probably from the 60s or maybe 70s.
Probably 70s.
Okay. And it's like this, but it's distorted inside to the degree. Like I say, there's 1,700 people in this town. It's distorted to the degree that you can see the aberrations from square.
Yes.
On the walls and in the door frames. And I'm like, I said, I'm going to have to come back with Plumb Bob and just take a picture of it. And then I decided that I didn't want to drive because it's an hour around the mountain to get there. So I said, I'm just going to buy a Plumb Bob. So I went to this local pizza store where I was eating lunch. And I said, where's the hardware? And he told me, and I got lost in the town of 1,700 people because I thought he meant I needed to get in my car. And I should have just walked down the street 2 buildings, actually attached to the hardware where I bought the Plumb Bob. And I did take the picture where the building is indeed shown to be 3 inches out of square.
In just the space of a doorway.
In a doorway, the doorway. And it's like this, it's like, I told the staff there, I said, look, you know, when I feel drunk, I really prefer to be drinking. There you go. Now you know. I took several, I had the staff take several pictures of it just for to make fun of the CEO of the hospital.
The trials and tribulations of being a country doctor.
Just a country doctor. Life is good.
So Wait a minute, I forgot what we were touching on.
Jet airplanes, photographs, small buildings, small towns.
Yeah. Anyway, so I can't, I don't feel competent to work, today.
That's
Hopefully
fine.
feel good.
I got to get you tuned up so that you're fit to go visit with the dignitaries that are now in country. And the luminaries of northern climes.
The dignitaries and luminaries. I think they'll appreciate that reference.
That's wonderful.
Hmm.
I like that. And that's like, I sent you guys some documents. I think you have all the documents. I should probably send another set just to make sure they're fresh on your email list.
Okay.
So, our German friend has a copies and he has reviewed at least one of them.
Okay, I haven't seen this.
I sent you and Brandon the other, and it's like I will send them again, just so that you can review that. I want you to talk about that because we have work to do. We have work to do.
We have a lot of work to do, but I've never been more optimistic than I am right now. In the past, it was just I'm just alone and it's too much work. Right. Then I got to, I don't know how to simplify this because I was sick and you helped me with that. And because of our collective efforts, I want to make another statement. Can I say this nicely? Every movement begins with fringe characters and moves increasingly towards non-fringe characters. And we're at the point where we have non-fringe characters, right? In our group. So it's and that's only within the past few years, right? I mean, it's past 3 or 4 years. So we're sort of maturing, and we'll get into more academic participants as well, although it's going to be hard to outwit Martin, and certainly it's looking like it's going to be hard to outwit Gabriel or Jacob. Certainly going to be, if you're not going to outwit Martin, you're not going to outwit Martin, you're certainly not going to outwit Gabriel either. Whether you outwit Jacob is just depending on whether he actually cares enough to. So we're getting
interesting. It's like you're not going to outwit them, but it's like the issue is the academics are not about wit; they're about grind.
Right. That's why the thing though is with academics is they tend not to lie in debate, in public debate, or they tend not to say too stupid things. Well, Bernard Kastorp, if they came up. Well, I can list a whole bunch of philosophers that say nonsense things. All right, I mean the list of idiot philosophers
right,
pretty long. But if we get real academics in that are not philosophers, but they're some branch of one of the sciences, you can have a discussion or debate with them that will almost always turn out to, well, I just don't think that's practical, or I wouldn't like to do that, versus us and saying we don't care whether it's practical or you'd like to do it. We care if it's true, right? And that would probably be the interest. At some point, we'll get the legal community, right? Because this is who it most affects. We'll get the legal community start to get involved, and at that point, it's done. Because they're the ones that need especially the people who've made the Supreme Court what it is today, right? Is a particular movement that happened as a counter reaction to the pseudoscientific law movement, the positive law movement. So that's a big organization. And if we make our way into that and we provide them with the formal logic to express their ideas, like we've provided conservatives, libertarians, the formal logic to explore their ideas, then I think that we'll have reached the academic position we're looking for. Because what we would want is this to start to be taught as the foundations of legal study, right? And then as all legal analysis is variation from it. And so you could discuss all the, because legal law is taught as basically case law today, which is examples. And then the Constitution's there to limit the examples, constrain the examples, but we don't have anything that limits the foundation before the Constitution that would allow the sequence from the science all the way up to there. So I'd like to see that. And once we have that, then you'll see it, we can see it make its way into the schools. And that we're going to continue our activism to help to get it into the schools. But it's going to take a bit for us to find some teachers or some educators who can reduce it to education that is possible in the schools. That'll happen naturally because it's too much of an advantage. If you have our knowledge, it's like it's like the difference between philosophy and theology, and between theology, philosophy and empiricism, between empiricism and science, because science is basically calculus and mathematics, and what we're doing is now computation.
Yeah, I have to break that down so that it's understandable to the common audience member. Okay. Which is to say, I'm not saying any of you guys are just commoners, but it's like, I think that I just want to make sure that I'm properly deferential. But it goes like this: is the advantage of this knowledge base is like you teach your kids morality so that no one takes advantage of them and they don't make stupid mistakes.
Yes.
If you teach them the science, it will be of similar advantage. They won't make stupid mistakes and they won't be taken advantage of. But in a similar fashion.
Want to take advantage of them. I mean, that was the whole communist idea, right? If give me a 5-year-old to indoctrinate and I'll be a communist for life. Why? Because they'll believe the lie. I mean, it's the same thing with communist Marxist indoctrination. It's the same thing with religious indoctrination. They're just looking for indoctrination. Well, I mean, the problem is you create that frame in somebody that it sticks, right? I mean, but you try to have an argument with a Marxist and they'll just tell you, either make up something that's completely false, or you say, well, let's go through the reasoning of this, and you just tear them apart. But they say you have to read. There, I'll go back to, you have to read Marx. No, I've read it. It's fucking idiotic, right? It's you believe it like scripture, but if I could give you I can falsify all the major tenets of Marxism. I mean, the idea of society as a family rather than a collection of families, right? All of this marginal, the labor theory of value, all these are all bullshit, right? And so it's totally a revolt against Darwin. And so you just put that together. You say, well, I mean, they won't ever change. And it's the same thing with theological people. They won't change, and none of those people will change because it's basically an addiction. And addictions won't change until the person hits a crisis that requires the change.
The exhaustion of opportunity is what we call that.
Yeah.
They double down until they hit rock bottom.
Right. So.
Oh yeah, I tell you this. I'm going to tell a little story because it will be amusing to you a little bit. Yesterday,
tease you while you tell it.
Of course.
Okay.
I wouldn't deprive you of your minor joys. It's like had the patient come in, and he's a nice fellow. He's an engineer, and he's an exceptional character. But he has a cancer, and he's in denial about his cancer. Which is to say, he keeps on telling me the other doctors say it's okay. And I'm like, it's not okay. And he's worried about marginal bleeding on the thing. And I'm like, no. So it got to the point yesterday where he's doubling down on his denial, to the point where I am yelling in his face. We have been dicking around with this for a year, and I'm done with the goddamn playing games. Right? I'm yelling at him so loud that I went to the front desk and I asked if she heard. And she said she had not heard. She did not hear. I said, I will.
Is she lying?
No. She's Apache. She won't lie. She said she didn't hear, and I said I'll try harder next time. I don't make sure my objections are quite clear.
I wish more doctors were like you.
It's just like, okay, you just,
Well, what's going to happen to them?
we'll see. I'm leaning on him now. Well, I told him I was going to fire him unless he did it my way, because I'm not playing anymore. I'm not going to be party to it. And so it's like, because it's like, what is it going to take for him to be properly impressed? Does that make sense? That's all it comes down to. And it's like, because he's trying to not be impressed. He's trying to, you know what I mean? It's like he's trying to play like something else is happening. It's like, nothing else is happening. This is not okay.
Is this serious cancer?
Now that's an interesting question. Is cancer serious? Is any cancer serious? Is itself serious? It's serious stuff.
You don't want to get, cancer of the spleen. You don't want to get,
it's
you,
like
if you get thyroid cancer, I mean, it's a pain in the ass, but
Yeah, this will be a more preferable kind, I would presume.
Okay.
But it's like the preferable cancer. It's like shit.
Yeah,
We're in this part of the drawback.
It's still a mortality problem.
It's a problem. It's like, okay, I don't want to play. So shoot, that's that story. So it's like that. I was yelling. I don't get to yell at my patients often, and I did enjoy that for a moment. It's just, it's kind of interesting, because it's like your bag of tricks of things you do to solve problems. Among them are me yelling at you and threatening you're going to need a new doctor.
Yes.
That one doesn't get used very frequently. But
that's so responsible of you.
Well,
that's very responsible.
You're trying to do your proper care, right? That's all. Now you have it.
I can't fire people, I when I fire, if it's getting to the point where I have to fire you, I'm pretty angry.
I understand.
Because it means everybody else has failed, right? So if I fire you, it's probably going to be brutal in public. So I'm like, I don't fire people, right? Because so I usually have other people fire people. So because I just can't stand it. So, but correcting people, like I won't tell you what senior exec at Microsoft I started with. You're fucking up your career. I'm telling you, it was true. I was right and it happened, but I mean, you're fucking up your career. And, right. And it's amazing if you're that honest with people, how they respect you.
Yes.
Right. I said, and so, and the guy, I mean, I did it over lunch.
Yeah.
Which was a shock to him. But I mean, you got sometimes, you just, truth is always the right fucking answer. It's always the right answer.
It's just a matter of when you unload it.
Right. I mean, you have to be in the right.
Okay, this is time.
Now who am I, right? I'm just some smart guy that is off running this company that has a minor interest in the organization, right? I mean, they've got the big consulting firms and large advertising agencies, but we're the expensive guys who fix those problems, the middle management and stuff. Get stuff done. So because we understand them. And so you have to use those, you have to shoot those silver bullets.
Yeah.
When you're saying it's immoral for me not to.
That's right. That's right. That's exactly what it comes down to. It's like, I must now. I don't have a choice. Yeah.
It's just, it's like, so you have those, I teased Steve Ballmer with one once, which was very funny. But with some of these, you just say, well, I'm just I don't really want to cover this with you, but it's moral obligation on my part, right? So go into it somehow. chased one guy into his office. Fucking this up. This guy's gonna quit. This is what's gonna happen, and it's gonna come back on you this way.
Yeah.
It's mad at me in the moment,
Yes.
but
It's okay.
that's okay.
That's why you wear big shoulders, right? It's like, that's okay.
Well, it's also why I don't like the job. I would, if people came to me, if they come to me and say something like, fix this business problem, and I have to go to your board and say, you guys are fucking this up, right? I'm okay, because they're grown-ups,
Right.
right? It's a grown-up conversation.
Yes.
They paid me money,
Yes.
tell them something, all right?
Right. Right.
They may not act on it,
That's
right?
right.
And they
That's right.
don't, right? But I'm like, that's what I get paid for,
Yes.
right? And you can guarantee that I'm not gonna come in and do it a big consulting firm, which is gonna charge you $3 million to give you a book this thick that tells you everything you already know, and I don't do that. But, so that's why you pay me $1 million and them $3 million, right? So go in, and so bring me and my team, we fix the problem. So anyway, so you that's one thing, but when you're going to a group that's highly political, right, and you're just like, you could easily just take the money,
Yes.
right? And I just can't. I just can't. I can't do it when I know it's gonna blow up, or it can reflect back on us. People can say you did it for the money. I'm not gonna.
Right.
So if I gotta have that hard conversation with somebody,
It's okay.
yeah, I would just prefer that they were asking me to have the hard conversation.
No, I understand, because it's unsolicited advice is always the most difficult to take.
Yeah, my one unpleasant interaction with, well, I won't say his name,
Right.
or Larry Ellison. Yeah. So I never got to really interact with Jobs. That would have been funny, because I would have I would have just agreed with him on everything. I mean, I wouldn't have. He was so everything he did was really sensible. I mean, right? There's nobody to. I had nothing to. Right. So the problem is you get to fix things in companies where something's broken. Right. And that's the fun part of being in the consulting business, because you learn about how all these companies do something. One of my favorite customers was a telco. Company telco. They make those big cabinets that all the wiring shit goes into.
Yeah.
And they really know their stuff, and they're American. They still American made, right? It's sturdy, it has mass to it, right? All right. And he's getting, of course, chewed up by overseas. And I'm going, the real problem is this guy is such a fucking romantic. I think I might have told you the story, or I've told the story a lot. So such a romantic. And he's trying to run the business like it's Little England, like it's all family.
Okay.
And so, it's got, I don't know, it's actually, they got 5 locations right around the world where they do most of the manufacturing. And in that case, I think, this is what you walk in. This is what I love about them. You walk in, there's a pedestal in the entryway with a copy of the 10 Commandments on.
Nice.
So, this is one of those companies where morality is actually a part of the business. Right. And the problem is that there becomes a competition between that luxury of family,
yes,
and the external market pressure that's coming into those. And the real problem, of course, is him.
Is what?
Is him. Right? That's why you sell a business, is because your personal, moral, loyal obligations to your staff are the thing you love about yourself and your life.
Yes.
But there's a point at which
when they conflict, it's problematic.
And you need to sell the business. And when you sell that business, you try to take care of the people around you. right? But
You alleviate your responsibility at that
right,
point.
and without that, because that's what when you that's what I advise people to sell
Hmm.
is when if you're a more because I'm a moral guy, you're a moral guy. There's other guys who run businesses morally, right? And they tend to be people who came up from the middle class and they built the business themselves and they got, you know, $500 billion business, right? And but they're still basically good men, right?
Yes.
The market has matured to the
Not so
point
good.
where you can't afford the previous luxury that you took your self-worth from. And so you have to think about, okay, well, I can lose this business and screw everybody, or I can sell the business. I can take care of people I love and go on in life and feel proud of my accomplishment. But then people who can take over this business don't have those loyalties and they can make the changes.
Yes.
It's most of the time, it's like, okay, we have to consolidate these two factories, right? We have to, I forget how many companies. I mean, it's so many, I can't think of, like, it's
Right.
like, I did that exercise a couple of months ago where I tried to look at all the office space I owned in the Seattle area, Bellevue, Seattle area.
Yeah.
And I was terrified when I mean, I couldn't even remember some of the addresses. I had to like walk through Google, find them. And then I was thinking of this yesterday. I was remember one of these offices, which is this startup I did. And I'm like, it was one of the first spin-off companies I did. I did, and I was like, I know I got coffee and I can't remember where. But where did we go for coffee in that
Yeah.
building? And it's gone. Right. I can remember having the coffee cup, but I can't remember where in the building the coffee was sold. Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's all, and then it's like, I can't even remember what building this one, I had a whole floor in a building in the southern middle center of Seattle downtown. And I can't remember where the hell it was. Right. But it's the same thing with companies. Like I remember the stories I tell. But if I went back yesterday, I was pulling out that archive and I looked at the archive of the hard disk, right? And it has one of the deals I did acquiring this company, right? Which is a pretty substantial company. I forgot I even did it. Right. So, you forget you have all this stuff in your head, right? And so you see the world through that lens, and then you see the world through the lens of our work, right? The science. And you realize what a disadvantage most people in the world operate from.
Oh, yeah.
You also realize that you're unemployable. Like I'm unemployable. What am I going to do? I mean, we're going to. If somebody told me we got this hot little company over here is having little problems, I could probably take it over and fix it. Almost certainly, right? But I'm like, there must be 10 other guys that would be easily do that job. I mean, who needs a fucking theoretical legalist, right? Epistemologist.
No, that's your sideline. You can't do that professionally.
Right.
That's all right.
Anyway,
making good progress.
I'd like to help companies raise money, but the problem is we've closed the window. The window's closed. They're throwing money at AI right now, and I read. I'm sorry. Can I missive on AI for a second?
Of course.
We've said it before. AI is not. We've known the path to AI for a long time. We've not had the computing power to do it, so that's why we were behind. Now they're taking this thing and they're working it the other way from language backwards. Right? They're trying to program the thing backwards. Right, from the language down into the principles, right? It has to develop an ethics, a logic and an ethics. They're trying to build it in to this neural network from the top down. I mean, it's actually really fucking dumb, right? I mean, really, if you look at how these things work, they're incredibly stupid, right? So they're really bad at logic. I mean, they can generalize because that's how the information is stored. But they can't, they have a very hard time with recursion, which is what you've seen develop now, is that they have all sorts of names for it. And I'm like, I don't know why this is fucking complicated. But I mean, it's just recursion, right? And so you're in recursion away from. So they're doing this pretty good job of building these things. They're trying to bring it down. Well, that's the advantage, right? I mean, we never, when I was working in the 80s, and when last time I worked on this problem in the 90s, right, to talk about this problem, you really didn't have the information available through the internet to go teach these things on.
Oh, right. There was not enough library.
Right, and now they've got this library of it's so great that, I mean, you have emergent properties out of just predicting the next fucking letter, or word, or symbol, token, right? And so it's pretty amazing to me. So, but you still have the same three problems, which is you have to have motivation, you have to have perception, which we have, right? You have to have disambiguation, which we have. You have to have episode modeling, which serves as the index for everything related. You have to have auto association for prediction, right? Which allows you to say, okay, this set of predictions look positive to me. That's convergence, right? Prediction through convergence of auto association.
Yeah.
You have that's in a competition, and it has to seize attention. And then you have to recursively work with this permutation, right? That's all it is. It's right. There's a sequence of problems, all right? They're trying to back propagate, they're trying to backwardly address this issue. But I mean, so when they talk about this AI scary and whatever, I'm like, I don't really get it, right? I mean, it's going to be like anything else, right? If you said the way you fix AI is there anybody involved in every single person is criminally liable.
Yes.
Right, for the behavior of the AI.
Yes.
Every single person. That'll fix the fucking problem. Are we going to get people using enemies, right? I mean, enemy, of course we are. We got nuclear bomb enemies. We have gunship enemies. We have, that's not
all kind of enemies.
That's never going to stop. The way you get around it is develop an AI that's pretty good at figuring out lying. And that's what all those things have to do, right? They have to lie.
That's right. That's right.
They have to violate a reciprocity. So you just set up a thing and it's like checks whatever it is for reciprocity and whatever. And sure, we're going to get robot drones and robot missiles and robot tanks, or whatever. And that's deterministic, right? But then what you're saying is the war then is a matter of industrial capacity.
Yes.
Right. Well, it's always been a matter of industrial capacity. You fucking morons. It doesn't make any goddamn
only as long as we've had industry.
Right. Well, I mean,
Right.
they found a sword the other day in a grave in South Central Europe that was from, I think, 3000 BC.
Wow.
3500 BC. Right. The thing's beautiful, right? I mean, it's in good enough condition that you can at least envision what this beautifully decorated handcrafted object was. But
yes.
I mean, you know how to make a bronze sword? I mean, it's like people make fucking candles, right? It's the same process.
Yes.
Right? I get a mold, I pour the candle, I take it apart, I trim off the excess, I polish it up a little bit, and that's it, right? I mean, candles just melt at a low temperature. And bronze is just copper and tin. Right? As you mix them together in the right proportion.
That's for you aspiring metallurgists at home.
And it's just all it is. I mean, it's just the reason people could do it because it was dumb. Right? I mean, they probably figured out.
It just requires some skill.
Actually, the hard part is heat.
Yeah, it's a lot of heat. Copper is hot.
The same thing with pottery. The real problem with pottery was making a kiln that could hold the heat. The same thing with smelting iron, which if you look, you know how to do that from in the old world, like with charcoal in a mound or what. I mean, it's like cooking a pig, under in the ground. Right? I mean, it's the same fucking process. But I'm being a smart ass. You have to make a tower and push stuff in and keep dropping it down. And then you get this chunk of iron. Then you do the same goddamn process to it to get it down to where it's congealed, right? And so the whole point is, can I do this? So until we get blast furnaces where you can throw oxygen at it
Yes.
And you just can't get all that shit out of it. So the iron is brittle. Right? I mean, it's nothing more than that. And then you get people taking iron and are putting ancestors' bones in it as a means of magic. And it turns out that adds carbon, which gets you steel.
It really works. Ancestor bones does make it better.
Right. And then, you get the Indians, and they have this wonderful tree. I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head, but it's basically lots of lightweight branches. And you put that in, and that gets you your and you fold that steel, and you get the Damascus right, through lots of folding. So I mean, you look at the history, and people some of this stuff is hard, but it's not that hard. But I mean, in the end, it's just industrial capacity. What is your capacity? I mean, look at we have this problem with oil today, but the old world had the problem with the materials for bronze, particularly tin, because you could find copper. But tin isn't exactly
tough,
all over
man.
the place.
Tin is tough. It's like they were going to Cornwall.
Yes.
It's like, we got to go to England and deal with those Celtic bastards. I mean, think about that. We got to leave the Mediterranean and bring it back.
Think about it this way. Let's think about it. Is that it's probably a chain of ships that are involved in the trade. It's not like nobody goes that far.
No, right.
Everybody goes, you go from Cornwall to
buy it from the guy in Spain, and who bought it from the guy in Cornwall, who bought it.
Because these are all
the Italian guy.
These are all coastal ships, right? This is not seafaring stuff, right? And so, and thankfully, you transport this stuff, and all of a sudden, that turns into being the equivalent of oil. Right. I mean, it's that important to your civilization, because, bronze means you can kick ass, and over guys with clubs.
Over the guys with the copper implements that are called victims.
Even that is that, we forget that the stone club, like that, even the stone axe, that survived a long time in Europe, because bronze was expensive.
Yeah.
So it's industrial capacity. So AI is another thing that's another means of lying, cheating, and stealing. And we'll have to develop a police system that prevents lying, cheating, and stealing. The problem is they're building an AI while teaching it to lie. Right? What I'm like is like, don't teach it to lie. Teach it to say, oh, I can't say that. But don't tell me like IQ isn't a valid measure of. It's just the opposite. Or don't tell me that there aren't race differences or sex difference. I mean, it's all crap, right? Don't tell me that. I'm not allowed to answer this question because it violates decorum.
I look at it like this: is like the people that are afraid of the AI somehow presume there's going to be a monolithic AI that's controlled by one group. I'm like, that's not what's happening. There's going to be a multitude of AIs, and they're going to compete. Yep. And then it's adversarial competition will reduce it to the right ones. It's
Bingo.
I just have to say the magic words, and it makes me look smart and stuff like that.
Oh, stop. You just applied the method. No, but it's true. I mean, that's what's going to happen. I mean, and what you're noticing today, and they said this, what's his name from Jewish guy, the gay Jewish guy from Open. I can't remember his name. Anyway, he said, well, you can't catch up with us because the compute investment they've put into the underneath is fine. But the problem is that that original inventory of vectors and weight, we call it weights, but it's basically so you have vectors and weights. So they basically have all the weights in this thing. And you say, well, once you have that, you've sent because they're running out of knowledge, to stuff into this thing. I mean, I guess they can start collecting Oprah Winfrey's gossip columns or something, but I mean, they're running out of stuff to put into this thing, right? And so now what they're doing is they're trying to refine it, and you find that they're able to make better AIs off of that source refined material. So that's the actual resource.
Is the database.
So what you'll find though is that database is going to be consumed and generalized into other databases that no longer require that database and
Yes.
can be updated. So you're going to, it's sort of like the first eukaryotic cell,
Yes.
right? And it divided, and then that's what's happening. So, so I think that's probably more of the way to look at it. And so you will have your own AI on your laptop eventually, right? And the rate at which they're spawning, I look at most of it's SHIT, but
Yes, sir.
but it's good. It's good R&D.
Yes.
And so we'll see what happens. But this is as big an evolution as the first programming, probably is Fortran. It's as big as Fortran. I'm not sure. I mean, you had really the Fortran C object oriented sort of sequence. How do you want to have this is, I don't know how to describe this anyway. But you had this sequence developed, and what eventually we got is to the high point of computing, believe it or not, is 3D video games. Right. I mean, you don't think of it that way, but think about what's going on there. It's a full world simulation with object interactions and events being fired from it, And I worked on bots for a while. I don't know if you and these games, there's fictional characters that run around and do things like shoot and hide. I got sort of friendly with one of the guys just doing that originally, and I was at the time I sold a company and I was working on a game simulation, and so I spent some time on that. And you make these bots that figure out the way around the world, and they make plans and routes and cunning strategies and stuff like that. And it turns out it's actually pretty simple, right? I mean, what do you got after that? There's nothing. That's just the world, right? It's just the size of the world, right? So the real problem, even with that model, is just you run out of computing power. So one of the problems you used to have in these games is the world would only be so big around you.
There's just so much space to compute in.
And then you'd have to, that's why your horizon was shorter and why you had a lot of mountains so that it didn't have to load the next set of geometries until you get in visual distance of them. Right. And so then we went off, and I don't know who's the guys who made Quake or whatever it was. They came out with these huge graphics that could incredibly graphic things for overlays. And then some other guys figured out ways of caching these things. And there's other ways that you say, well, I'm going to keep the data in memory, but I'm only going to color and paint those things within this. I mean, you just play these games all the time. And now they've got it down to where, they've got literally, they're tracing beams of light, right? Which is, if you look at the new Unreal Engine, either just come out or is about to come out, I'm not tracking it that carefully. I mean, it's terrifying. I mean, you could take a graphic image of like a lumpy surface and it will figure out how to present it as 3-dimensional. Right? I mean, it's just absurd. Well, that's my view is that's the high point of the computer science. It's a simulation of the real world, which is fascinating. So, so my view is this AI is on that scale.
Yeah.
Right. It's a completely new paradigm, but it's the paradigm we have the least control over. And it's right now, it's the most expensive.
Yes.
To produce, right? You think about guys writing the C language, it was a couple of guys, right? The guy who wrote, Linus Torvalds wrote Linux, right? I mean, you used to be able to do that by yourself. When I wrote games in the 80s, I could write them myself. That was my hobby for a while, right? They were beautiful, right? I mean, I was writing an assembly language and all this other crap. But then you go out today, and it's a $20 million project or an $80 million project. It's like creating creating a mainstream movie, a summer block.
Yeah.
Right. And so it takes that many people to do it. The same thing as all the compute that went into building these first models. It's just almost impossible. I mean, it was so expensive. Now, will it come down? Sure. I mean, look at what NVIDIA is producing in processors, and they're still 25 grand a piece or something like that, or something absurd, right? But they'll come down to where the compute power is lower and lower. And then the next thing will happen is the neuromorphic computing will come out, which will combine instead of these central processors, this distributed processors, each of one with some equivalent of this vector compute power. And all of a sudden will be, then it'll be really weird. Because I mean, if you look at the decrease in voltage necessary to run an Intel processor and Apple's new M1 processor, which is like, it's a joke, but it can practically run by the electricity generated by running your finger over the top of it.
Right.
Right. It doesn't take anything at all. That's why the new MacBooks don't need so much power, so much cooling. So, you have these big leaps. Those leaps are coming together, and that'll be relatively obvious. So, and I think your explanation is right, is the market competition between AIs will solve the problem, and that's all. The only thing we have to do is say everybody in the line of chain of custody, basically. Everybody in the chain of custody of the AI is liable for the
Figure
damage.
of the AI.
Right, and so that'll solve every problem that's domestic. Most commercial problems. It won't solve the military, but then the military is solved by the other militaries.
That's right. They're keeping each other in line.
Right, like you don't want to try that. So, but I think the age of crypto is probably going to get burnt up within the next 20 years, and not because of this, but because of something else. So I think we're entering a really interesting period if we can politically survive it. I mean, it's demographically, politically survive it, but we might be at the point where the Roman Empire was. They're just about to discover the Industrial Revolution, and everything fell apart. That's the opposite view. Anyway, did I scare you enough with that one?
I'm not scared.
So I'm whining about the AI bullshit. It's just, I mean, it's
just nonsense.
YouTube is saturated. You know what I see them really doing? I see them really doing is, we warned you that this could happen. Precisely so, they don't get held accountable when it does happen. So all the behavior I see from these guys is two things: slow everybody down so we can catch up, or I'm setting the stage for not being blamed when we obviously fail because somebody's going to. So that's all I see here. The EU just put a piece of legislation in place. I don't think it's meaningful. You need the one I just said, which is if you worked on it, you're liable for it. And so that'll mean everybody applies maximum due diligence. Because who wants to get hit with $1 billion effing?
Take a bite out of anybody's.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you, there's good guys who would go into the business just because they knew that they would be able to do the right thing, right? And could guard against it instead of going in there and being coerced to do the wrong thing.
Right.
And that'd be such a, man, especially if you made it international, right? It's a crime against humanity to create an AI that does X.
Yeah, we'll go after you.
We'll go after you regardless of what country you're in.
We don't care. I like that because that's just how we roll. Well,
that's how we do with nuclear weapons, right? I mean, it's like if you spread nuclear weapons, we're going to find you and kill you, right? I mean, that's our government doesn't say that, but that's what they do.
That's what we do. We don't need to say it so loud. It's the part we say, don't say out loud, right?
All right.
We did a good job, Curt.
I had fun today. Hopefully I'll be present tomorrow. I had fun today. We covered good stuff today, but I don't feel, I can't hold, my context isn't there. But we've been making great progress, you and I, the past bunch of sections. So thank you.
Very good.
All right, Dr. Brad, thanks for having, you have a great day.
I will, and I'll look for you tomorrow, or you go up to visit those fellows.
I'm suspecting it's going to be Monday by the time I feel better.
All right. Either
All
way,
right, so
fine. I'll be here.
do your thing.
Yeah, you hit that button right there. The notifications, the subscribe, and leave those glorious comments for us because we just love them.
Like, subscribe, bell, leave comments. We love
There
you.
you go. Kurt did it in the right
Tell
order.
Brad he's handsome. I got somebody to say that last time.
That
was
was
great.
impressive.
That was good.
All right.
Love you all. Thanks for following. Bye-bye.
Bye.